I watched from my window as my family boarded their vacation flight, except this time, it wasn't on the jet I'd arranged. No, I'd made sure they'd all be left standing on the tarmac, staring at a cold, empty runway, their luggage piled in front of them, but no plane in sight. They had made their choice, and now it was my turn to show them what it felt like to be excluded, to be invisible. My name is Vanessa Cole, I'm 34, and I run a luxury event management company. You could say I'm good at what I do, really good. But there's more to me than they ever realized. I've spent years in the background, quietly building an empire, while they thought I was nothing more than the distant, overlooked family member. They always thought I'd be the one left behind, the one who couldn't keep up, the one who'd never fit in. But today, I was holding the power. Today, the tables were turning. It all started innocently enough, an invitation to a family vacation, a supposed getaway for the whole crew. But I wasn't included. No surprise there. The last time I'd been invited on one of these trips, it was a last-minute afterthought. The "oh, we thought you had other plans" excuse. So I wasn't shocked when the invitation didn't arrive. It's funny how people forget about you when they think you're no longer useful, no longer relevant to their perfect picture of a family. But I had a plan this time. A quiet, subtle revenge that would speak louder than any words. I sent a private jet to pick them up, just like they'd always dreamed of. But when they showed up to the airport expecting luxury and comfort, they'd find something very different waiting for them. The jet would be gone. The flight canceled. What I was about to do was more than just a practical joke. It was about showing them who I had become, who they had never bothered to see. It wasn't about revenge, it was about power. It was about making them feel the sting of exclusion that I had endured for so long. And as I stood there, staring out the window, watching them gather at the airport, all I could think was they have no idea what's coming. The first time I realized I was invisible to my family was during a Christmas dinner when I was 14. I was sitting at the table, quiet as usual, watching the conversation unfold in the most typical way. Everyone was talking, laughing, and exchanging stories. My cousin Rachel had just gotten into an Ivy League school, and everyone couldn't stop talking about it. My parents were beaming with pride, their voices bubbling over with excitement about how amazing their daughter was. I was proud of Rachel, too, but the constant praise felt like a needle digging deeper into my skin every time her name came up. When it was my turn to speak, I stumbled over my words. It didn't matter what I said. I wasn't the one they were paying attention to. No one even looked at me as I fumbled through some story about school. "Oh, that's nice," my uncle remarked absently, barely lifting his eyes from his phone. "You know, Rachel's doing great things. She's going places." The message was clear. I wasn't, not really, not in the way they expected. And from that moment on, I learned my place in the family. I was the background character, the one who was always quietly overlooked. No one meant to do it. It wasn't malicious, but I was invisible all the same. Years passed, and the feeling didn't change. High school came and went, then college. Rachel went off to New York to chase her dream of becoming a lawyer. My other cousins followed similar paths, all with grand ambitions, grand successes, but not me. When I finally made the decision to study event management, they didn't even pretend to understand. "What kind of career is that?" my mother had asked, her voice tinged with concern that bordered on disappointment. "You should be thinking bigger. Aim higher." I didn't aim higher. I didn't even aim for anything that was visible to them. I learned that day that the path I had chosen wasn't worthy of their attention. To them, it wasn't glamorous enough, not prestigious enough to matter. I wasn't going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an executive things they could point to with pride and say, "That's my kid." Vanessa's always been independent, my father would say at family gatherings. "She doesn't need anything from us." The words were meant to be a compliment, but they were anything but. I could hear the subtext. "She's just fine on her own. We don't need to worry about her." But I was never fine on my own. I was always left to figure things out in silence, away from their gaze, away from their expectations. And then came the family vacations. You know, the trips they talked about for months in advance, the ones they made sure everyone knew about. Except me, of course. Every year, I would hear about them leaving for some exotic location, some once-in-a-lifetime adventure, while I stayed at home, nursing my quiet resentment. "Don't worry, Vanessa," my cousin Ben once said. patting me on the shoulder after one of these trips. We thought about inviting you, but, well, you know how it is. It's a family thing. You wouldn't want to be stuck with us, right? And that was it. That was the excuse. The final nail in the coffin. The family thing, I wasn't part of the thing. I was on the outside looking in, always the last to be considered, always the one who had to fend for herself. The more I was excluded, the more invisible I became to them. No one noticed how hard I was working to build a career, how late into the night I stayed up planning events, making calls, putting everything together from nothing. No one saw how I was building something for myself, something that would stand apart from their expectations. To them, I was just Vanessa, the one who was always fine, but I wasn't fine. I was angry, and I was tired of being the afterthought. It's funny how people can't see what's right in front of them, how they can overlook someone until they've already built an empire. Until the numbers add up, the success speaks for itself. I had never been the one to loudly declare my worth, to demand attention or praise. I just worked quietly, steadily, and relentlessly, as if the world's indifference only fueled me more. I started small, really small. A freelance event planner for local businesses, a few weddings here and there, helping people with small gatherings. I learned the ropes, honed my skills, and slowly but surely built a network of clients who valued me, not just for what I could do, but for my attention to detail, my calm under pressure, my ability to transform an idea into something real. But none of that was visible to my family. I didn't need them to see it, but the truth was, I'd become something they would never have imagined. I was the quiet powerhouse, the one who took their dismissals and their offhand comments and turned them into fuel to grow, to succeed, and to rise above their expectations. I didn't make a big show of it. There were no social media posts flaunting my success, no bragging about the high-profile clients I was starting to attract, or the lucrative contracts I was securing. Instead, I kept my head down and the work spoke for itself. Slowly, businesses that have once seen me as just a planner began to realize I wasn't just good at what I did, I was essential. They needed me. My skills had value. A few years in, I expanded. My small team grew, and with it, the scale of the events I was managing. I started working with corporations, planning global conferences, and organizing multi-million-dollar launches. Suddenly, I wasn't just a freelancer. I was a force in the event planning industry, but still my family didn't notice. They didn't see the awards I was receiving, or the articles featuring my work, or the fact that I was now managing an empire of my own. Whenever I visited them, I still played the part. I was the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves, who wasn't doing anything special, at least not in their eyes. I sat in the corner, listened to the endless chatter about my cousin's new jobs or my uncle's latest vacation home. I smiled, nodded, and kept my achievements to myself because I didn't need them to validate me. It wasn't until a major deal fell into my lap that things started to shift. A high-profile client wanted to host a gala in New York. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The budget? Over $10 million. The venue? A historic estate overlooking the skyline. It was the kind of event that could change everything. I was terrified, but I did it anyway. I pulled together a team, managed every detail down to the smallest flower arrangement. And when the event went off without a hitch, the press took notice. Soon, I was being contacted by other companies, larger ones, multinational corporations, asking if I would help with their launches and events. Now, I wasn't just an event planner, I was a name people recognized, a professional whose expertise was in demand. And still, my family had no idea. To them, I was just Vanessa, the one who didn't go to law school, the one who was fine on her own, the one they could forget about until they needed to fill a spot at the family table. But I was no longer the same person who had once been excluded from family vacations or overlooked in conversations. I had built something that was entirely mine, something they would never understand. And yet, I wasn't going to rub it in their faces. I wasn't going to demand recognition. No, I had learned that true power lies in silence, and in silence, I had grown. The invitation to the family vacation came, or rather, didn't come. And when I didn't receive one, the absence hit harder than it should have. It was the same old thing. The pattern was all too familiar. The family gathering, the group trip, the endless chatter about how we're all going to have the best time. But once again, my name was absent from the list. It was as though I wasn't even considered. This time, though, I wasn't going to let it slide. I had the power now. I had built a life they couldn't ignore, a success they couldn't overlook. And it was time for them to realize that I didn't make a scene. I didn't storm into the living room and demand an explanation. Instead, I did what I always do best: work quietly, efficiently, and in complete control. I called in a favor, arranged a private jet, and booked it for the exact day they were supposed to leave. It wasn't just any jet either. It was a top-of-the-line luxury jet, sleek, polished, a masterpiece of comfort and style. They would arrive at the airport, expecting to step onto their jet for the dream vacation they'd been planning. But instead, they'd find nothing. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The day of their departure, I was calm, collected, as though nothing out of the ordinary was happening. I kept my phone nearby, watching the plans unfold, knowing exactly what would happen when they arrived. I knew the moment they'd stand there, waiting in confusion, realizing the jet had been canceled. What they didn't know was that the jet wasn't just canceled. It was never meant to show up. I had booked it with the intention of leaving them standing on the tarmac, without a way to get to their vacation. It was a calculated move, a statement in silence. They would feel the weight of their oversight, their exclusion, and then the call came. The one I had been waiting for. Vanessa. My cousin Ben's voice crackled through the phone. He sounded confused, a bit rattled. There's been a mistake. We can't get on the jet. It's not here. What happened? I didn't say anything for a moment. I let the silence sit there, knowing he was expecting an explanation. He deserved the silence, deserved the uncomfortable pause, the weight of the moment sinking in. "I'm sorry, Ben," I said finally, my voice calm, almost disinterested. "But I think you're mistaken. The jet isn't coming. I canceled it." The line was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear him shuffling, likely looking for answers. "What? Why would you—" "Because I thought you'd enjoy the vacation," I interrupted smoothly. "I wanted to make sure you had the same great experience you've always had without me. I didn't think you'd want to be left out of the fun again." It wasn't the words themselves that held the power. It was the way I said them, measured, precise, calm. And as the realization hit him, as it sunk in that I had planned this all along, I knew what it meant. They were finally seeing me not just as Vanessa, the quiet one, the one they could dismiss, but as someone who had earned her place, earned her power. And for the first time, they realized just how far out of their reach they had pushed me. I ended the call before he could say anything more. There was nothing left to say. They had made their choices, and now I had made mine. The aftermath came like clockwork. I received calls, texts, messages, an unrelenting barrage of questions, anger, and confusion. They were upset, naturally. But there was a hint of something else, something they hadn't considered until it was too late. Regret. Ben called again, his voice sharp and filled with disbelief. "Vanessa, this isn't funny. You can't just—" He paused, trying to collect himself. "Why would you do this? You know, this is ruining the whole trip for us." "Ruining it?" I repeated, my tone cool. "I'm sorry, I thought you'd have enough fun without me. Seems like you're all handling it just fine." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. He didn't know how to respond because, deep down, I knew he hadn't expected me to stand up for myself this way. He never expected me to take control, especially not in a way that forced them to confront the way they'd always treated me. "You're being petty," he finally muttered, but I could tell the words had lost their sting. He wasn't angry anymore, just ... confused. They all were. For the first time, they didn't know how to handle me. I didn't reply to that. I didn't need to. A few hours later, Aunt Marie called. Her voice was soft, tentative, almost apologetic, which surprised me more than anything else. "Vanessa, we didn't understand. We didn't think. It wasn't meant to hurt you. You know that, right?" I could hear the tension in her voice, the crack of realization. They hadn't meant to exclude me, they had just done it without even thinking about it. They had gotten so comfortable in their bubble that they forgot I was outside it. "You didn't think?" I said quietly, but with conviction. "And that's the problem, Aunt Marie. You never thought." You never saw me as part of the group, never considered how your actions might make me feel. It was always about what you wanted." I heard her sigh on the other end of the phone. "I didn't mean for it to come across that way. I just ... I'm sorry, okay? I should have reached out. I should have thought about how you'd feel." Her apology was sincere, but I knew it was not the first time I had been left out. It wasn't the first time they had chosen to exclude me to make me feel like the outsider. It wasn't even the first time they had treated me as an afterthought. This time, though, they had to face it, and they didn't like the reflection. I let her apology hang in the air, but I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I wasn't seeking reconciliation. I wasn't seeking their approval anymore. They were seeking mine, and that was the shift. The next few days passed with more phone calls and messages. They tried to justify their actions, to explain themselves in 1,000 different ways. "It wasn't personal," they insisted. "You know we love you," they said. But it was clear now that none of those words mattered. What mattered was that they had finally realized that I had value. Not because they gave it to me, but because I had built it myself. In the end, it wasn't the apology that changed things. It was the silence that followed. The realization that they couldn't just leave me out, that I wasn't just someone they could ignore. I wasn't going to beg for their acceptance anymore. I had my own place. I had earned my seat at the table, and I wasn't going to let them forget it. Months had passed since the family trip debacle, and the dust had settled. I hadn't heard much from them after that final confrontation. No big reunions, no dramatic apologies. Things had shifted, though, in subtle ways that spoke more loudly than any grand gesture or words could. The messages I'd received after the vacation incident had tapered off into silence. The calls, the attempts to explain away their actions, had all but stopped. At first, I wondered if they truly understood the weight of what had happened, if they were just too embarrassed to face me, or if they had simply moved on. But then, a few months later, Aunt Marie called again. This time, there was no hesitation in her voice. "Vanessa, I just wanted to say that I've been thinking about what you said, and I want you to know that I've been proud of you always. I'm sorry for how it looked, how I made you feel. You've accomplished so much, and I see it now. I really do." I listened quietly, letting her words sink in. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, the change that had begun to take root. They hadn't seen me before, not really. But now it was different. It wasn't just her. I began to notice small shifts in the way they spoke to me, the way they looked at me. There was more recognition, more acknowledgement of what I had achieved, though it was unspoken. In a way, I had earned my place, not through their validation, but through my own relentless pursuit of success. I realized something important during those months. It wasn't about their recognition. I had spent so much of my life seeking their approval, trying to prove I belonged in the same circles as them, that I had forgotten where my true power lay. The real power came from knowing who I was, from not needing anyone else's validation. In the silence after the confrontation, I had come to terms with something that had been hard to accept before. I wasn't the one who needed to change. I wasn't the one who needed to prove anything to anyone. They were the ones who had to reckon with their assumptions, their neglect, their silence. And by stepping into my own power, I'd given them the space to see that. Months later, when I saw them all at a family gathering, I wasn't looking for an apology. I didn't expect them to kneel at my feet or beg for my forgiveness. I wasn't even looking for anything from them, except respect. And that respect had been quietly earned. It was there in the way they looked at me, in the way they no longer treated me as the invisible one, the background character in their perfect family script. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. That was the most important thing I learned during that time. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore or even recognition. What I had built was mine, and they would never forget it. To the viewer watching, remember this. The world may forget you. The people who should love you may overlook you, but that doesn't mean you're invisible. Your worth doesn't depend on anyone else's perception of you. Keep pushing forward, keep growing, and one day you'll realize you were never the one who needed to prove anything. You were always worthy of what you have. You just had to see it for yourself first. Stay strong. Your story isn't over yet. It's just beginning.